Okay, we are up to 1969. So the 60s are coming to an end. The Beatles are a big deal, as are these guys. Again, I'm running out of hat jersey combinations that I can use without repeating. But it bears repeating that the Montreal Canadiens at 46, 19, and 11 are the class of the league. And there's a lot of firsts that get set this year. Boston's 42, 18, and 16, so they're right on the verge of taking over for themselves for a couple years. The Rangers 41, 26, and 9, and then the Maple Leafs make the playoffs at 35, 26, and 15, but they're not the same as they were in 70. Detroit misses the playoffs 33, 31, and 12, and Chicago misses the playoffs at 34, 33, and 9, and we'll discuss why that's angering in 5. Well, I'll do it now. St. Louis 37, 25, and 14 shows that there is an expansion team that can compete. This is a solid record. At least would make them a playoff team in the East. Now, the question then becomes, if they were playing these teams, what would their record look like? Well, it's a 76-game schedule now, and it's going to be weighted in favor of your division, so we'll never know. But odds are it wouldn't be as good. Second place is the Oakland Seals, 29, 36, and 11. This is the first time and last time they will finish second. This is the first and last time they have home ice advantage to start the playoffs, and it is the first of 2 times they actually make the playoffs. It is not a great history that the Oakland Seals write. But 29, 13, 36, and 11 is the best record they'll ever have. They're followed by Philly at 20, 35, and 21. Followed by LA at 24, 42, and 10. Pittsburgh 20, 45, and 11. And Minnesota at 18, 43, and 15. So it is a miserable time for basically every expansion team, minus, I guess, Oakland and St. Louis. Oakland is about to make the biggest mistake of their lives, one that maybe shortened the life span of the organization when they make a ghastly trade, but we'll get into that later. That doesn't get made this year. This year things look kind of rosy for them. Look, they're ahead of Philly. Hart goes to Phil Esposito. The Art Ross goes to Phil Esposito. The Norris goes to Bobby Orr. The Calder goes to Danny Grant of Minnesota. So Danny Grant of Minnesota winning a trophy, not in the original 6. And the Vezina goes to Jacques Plante and Glenn Hall. The veterans get it done for the St. Louis Blues. The Lady Byng goes to Alex Delvecchio. The Masterton goes to Ted Hampson of the Oakland Seals. And the Conn Smythe goes to Serge Savard of the Montreal Canadiens. Records are set. Phil Esposito, 126 points. He's the first one to ever get 100 points, and he's not alone. Bobby Hull gets 107. Gordie Howe gets 103. So what is this, the 22nd, 23rd year in the career of Gordie Howe, and he's getting 100 points? That's crazy. And Bobby Hull gets 58 goals, which is a new record. But that's not going to last for very long either, because it's expansion, so of course records are going to get set. Bobby Hull is now the highest paid player in the NHL at $100,000. But soon, he's going to bolt for a brand new league and make even more money. The Habs, Montreal, get to 100 points, 103. Boston gets to 100. This is the first time in NHL history that a team has reached 100 points. The Blues allow 157 goals against, which is almost 40 less than anybody else in the NHL. So St. Louis playing a very defensive style at a time when everybody else is scoring a ton of goals. First team All-Stars, Esposito in Boston, Howe in Detroit, Hull in Chicago, Orr in Boston, Tim Horton in Toronto, Glenn Hall, St. Louis. He is the first team All-Star for an expansion team. Second team All-Star, Beliveau in Montreal, Cournoyer in Montreal, Mahovlich in Detroit. Yeah, Frank Mahovlich did end up going to Detroit. He had 49 goals this year. If he'd stayed in Toronto, who knows? Ted Green in Boston is the second team All-Star, and Ted Harris in Montreal is the second team All-Star. Eddie Giacomin is your second team All-Star in net. So the only player in the first 2 All-Star teams of the NHL from an expansion team is Glenn Hall, who's a holdover from the Chicago Blackhawks, who missed the playoffs. It's worth noting, too, in the awards, the Lester Patrick goes to Bobby Hull and Edward J. Jeremiah. So Bobby Hull wins this award while he's still employed in the NHL as a player and setting goal-scoring records. The number one pick that year, a guy who would get 5 Stanley Cup rings, is Rajah Uhl. Rajah Uhl would play 635 NHL games, 161 goals, 247 assists, 408 points. He would also play 214 games in the World Hockey Association for the Quebec Nordiques. He'd play 214 games, 118 goals, 139 assists, 257 points. Again, and it's worth noting, there are players in this era who played a lot of time in the WHA that definitely impacted their career numbers as an NHLer. And Rajah Uhl is one of those guys. The playoffs. Here's the playoffs up here. Quarterfinals. Montreal with home ice against the Rangers. It's 1 versus 3, 2 versus 4, and there's still no complaints that I know of. Montreal wins this one 3-1, 5-2. Then they go to New York. They win 4-1 and 4-3. They sweep that series. Boston plays Toronto. I am stunned by these scores. I looked at them. I looked them up twice. 10-0 in Game 1 for Boston. 7-0 in Game 2 for Boston. Then they go to Toronto, and they win 4-3 and 3-2 to sweep that series. So Boston is getting tuned up for a Stanley Cup, just not yet. L.A. and Oakland. So a California series. This is the first time this has happened. Won't be the last. The L.A. Kings win Game 1 in Oakland, 5-4. Oakland wins Game 2, 4-2. Go on the road and win 5-2. But L.A. wins the next game, 4-2. The Oakland Seals win Game 5, 4-1 to go up 3-2. This would have been the only time Oakland would have advanced in the playoffs. But then they lost Game 6 and 7, 4-3 and 5-3. LA wins the series in 7. Philly and St. Louis, well, this is a wipeout. St. Louis wins 5-2, 5-0, 3-0, and 4-1. Thanks for coming out. 3 goals allowed in 4 games by the St. Louis Blues. Boston, Montreal, a dogfight ensues. Montreal wins games 1 and 2, both in overtime, 3-2 and 4-3. Boston then wins at home 5-0. Gerry Cheevers is the first goaltender in NHL history to win 3 straight by shutout at home in the playoffs. Doesn't matter. They win Game 4 as well, 3-2, but Montreal wins at home 4-2, and then wins Game 6 in Boston in double overtime, 2-1, to win the series in 6. Montreal-Boston is a bad matchup for, right, Boston. Yeah, you guys have been watching. LA and St. Louis. This is another wipeout. St. Louis destroys LA. 4-0, 5-3, or 4-0, 3-2, 5-2, 4-1. Sweep. So St. Louis sweeps their way to the Stanley Cup and plays Montreal again. Now, 68, this is a close series. 69, it's a little less close. 3-1, 3-1, 4-0, 2-1. Montreal sweeps the Stanley Cup final again. So they sweep in the first round, they sweep in the last round. Boston gives them fits in round 2, but Montreal wins 3 of those 4 games in overtime. So, again, we're already into an era where you can look and say, well, the real Stanley Cup final is, and point to a different series other than the Stanley Cup final. October 27, 1968, Gordie Howe is the first player to hit 900 assists. He also was the first one to hit 600 goals that year. November 7th, 1968, Red Berenson of the St. Louis Blues gets 6 goals and 1 assist in a game. March 2nd, 1969, Phil Esposito that day becomes the first player to hit 100 points in a season. March 30th, 1969, Gordie Howe sets new records with 21 goals and 64 points by a defenseman. Yeah, that's the record. 64 points in a season by a defenseman. I think Gordie Howe is going to break that record pretty soon, and seemingly with ease. And as stated, this is the best season for the Oakland Seals. This is as good as it gets. And we'll see tomorrow. They still make the playoffs, but it's not an encouraging future that they have to look forward to, and then they mess things up. Because the draft is important. You'll notice the draft pick yesterday and today, the number 1 draft pick, both of them were NHLers. both of them from Montreal. And Montreal somehow seems to be able to get the number 1 draft pick because they understand the importance of the draft right out of the gate, and other teams don't. But there you go. The 1969 Stanley Cup champions, the Montreal Canadiens again. So there you go. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below any thoughts you have about how angering this system would be if you had it now, where teams were above 500, more wins than losses, missed the playoffs, and 3 teams below 500 made it. Just imagine the amount of complaining that would go on then. It's interesting, and I'd be interested to know your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video, and I'll talk to you again soon.